Well, howdy friends, Brian Flechsig of Mad River Outfitters here, and today we're going to walk you through some variations on the woolly bugger. Now in one of our previous tutorials, I showed you a basic woolly bugger. Today, we're just going to walk through the same fly, but just show you some simple variations on it. And the first thing I'm going to do different is I'm going to tie on a 3X long hook shank. The point being, you can tie it on a 3X, you can tie it on a 4X, you can tie it on a 2X for that matter. The versatility of this fly and the variations are endless. But in our first tutorial, we showed you the 4X. I'm going to tie on a 3X today, and I'm also going to add a cone head to this. Also in previous tutorials, we've showed you how to weight a fly by putting lead wraps around it, or bead heads or cone heads. And we're just going to slap a cone head on this today. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp the barb on that hook, which is what I like to do that on my fly tying desk before I tie the fly or after I'm done. And that way it's done, because we always like to fish a barbless fly. And the secondary benefit is allow me to get this cone head over the barb of the hook and over around the bend and onto the hook a lot easier. So all I do is install that cone head first. That's the first step. Then I'm going to insert the hook into the jaws of my vise, and I'm going to start my thread as I do with every fly. Today, as I normally do on tying medium-sized streamers, I'm using 140 denier ultra thread, somewhere along the lines of a 3/0 type thread if you're used to that. And I'm simply going to start my thread and wrap back to the bend of the hook. And I guess I had better also put on my cheaters, which we've also shown you in a previous, so I can see a little bit better. These are the Click goggles, by the way. Look for one of the little product reviews we've done on those. And then of course I'm going to add the tail to my fly, and we're going to do something just a little bit different on the tail of this fly than we did in our original. But I'm going to take 2 marabou feathers, and excuse me, this is woolly bugger marabou, specifically selected for tying a woolly bugger. And the way I do it, which is of course probably different than you've seen elsewhere, is I just marry 2 feathers, kind of concave to concave side, so they work against each other. And I put those 2 feathers, pinch them in between my thumb and my index finger in my right hand, and I measure. And as with most of the flies that I tie, I want the tail to be approximately the same length as the hook shank. So I get my basic measurement, then I'm going to switch hands, and then I'm going to do my pinch method. I pinch, pinch, pull straight down, pinch, pinch, pull straight down, and the feathers should be seated right on top of the hook shank. Again, the way I do this fly is I go ahead and wrap the stems of those feathers, albeit I waste a little bit, but it gives a nice underbody for this fly. Makes it a little bit more secure. Then once I trim the excess stems, I'm just going to wrap my thread back to the bend of the hook, which is where I start each fly, and that tail is going to be going off the bend. So I've got approximately the same length. I can measure with my hook points, approximately the same length of tail as I do of hook shank. Now, something we'll do a little different, which we did not show you in the first tutorial, is we're going to put a little flash in this tail. And what I've got is just a pack of basic pearl crystal flash. You can use other materials like Flashaboo or the countless other flash materials, but crystal flash is kind of a staple. And here's a cool little tip when you're working with crystal flash. What I've done is cut one of the corners out or cut a little triangle in the plastic package. That allows me to keep the crystal flash in the package, and then I'm going to use my scissor points to just pull out the perfect number of strands that I want, trim it off, and off I go. That saves you pulling this out of the package and getting it tangled up in your fly tying supplies and what have you. Then I'm going to take this crystal flash. I've got 3 strands, 4 strands. Of course, the fish doesn't care. It matters more to me than the fish. And I'm simply going to lay those 4 strands right along the side facing me, and then I'm going to pinch those in place. And now I'm going to do a pinch method, but instead of going straight up and down, I'm going to do a pinch method off to the side. So I pinch, pinch, and pull 180 degrees of where I want that material to seat. So I pinch, pinch, pull straight off to the side. Now I can wrap my thread again back to the bend, which is of course where that fly starts, and I can trim the excess. Now I'm going to come and do the same on the opposite side. In my case with this Regal vise, I can rotate it a little bit, hold it in place, pinch, pinch, pull 180 degrees of where you want it. Pinch, wrap over the butts there, and then again wind up with my thread back at the bend of the hook. So what I've done is just added a little bit of flash to that tail. So now the really cool thing, and you may or may not have seen this, actually I think this was shown to me a number of years ago by Lefty Cray. Jerry Darkus and I put this technique in one of our DVDs called Cool Flies for Hot Fish, but we named this the Super Bugger. And it's a little different way of applying your chenille and hackle. We're going to do them both at the same time. Of course, I'm using basic standard chenille for the body and a rooster saddle feather for the hackle. So I'm going to pick a nice long saddle hackle feather here, and I'm going to tie that in by the tip. Grab it by the tip, stroke the fibers down, and then I can simply lash it to the hook shank right there at the bend of the hook. All I did was just lashed it on, nothing fancy. You're just getting it attached to the hook shank. Then I'm going to take my chenille, pull off enough of that. I'm going to use my thumb and index finger to kind of pull off some of the pipe cleaner type material to get to the cotton core. And that's where I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to tie it in by the cotton core so I don't have a big hump of materials there that I'm having to tie over. And I'm using red chenille on this one here today, folks, so that you can see very clearly what I'm doing. So I've got my tail tied in, put a little flash. I attached the saddle hackle feather and I attached the chenille right there at the bend of the hook. I'm basically done with that part of the hook shank. I'm going to wrap my thread forward to just behind where my cone is and let it hang. Now here's the kind of cool technique. I'm going to take these two pieces, the saddle hackle feather and the chenille, and I'm going to take my hackle pliers, a standard pair of hackle pliers, or my favorite, the rotating hackle pliers. I actually like the standard hackle pliers for this better because they've got kind of a fatter head to grab onto this with. And now I'm going to start to twist the chenille and the hackle feather. And what this does is, first of all, it allows me to create this body in only one step. Secondarily, it creates a much more durable fly. We've all fished a woolly bugger before, and after a while you catch a few fish, you've been slinging around for a few hours, and the hackle feather pulls out and unravels. This will prevent that from ever happening to you again. Now, granted, it's not going to look quite as pretty and not quite as palmered as you would get if you tied it the standard way, which we showed you in the previous tutorial, but trust me, the fish doesn't care, and this is going to make a much more durable fly. So I get quite a few wraps, as you see, and then I'm going to grab onto it with my fingers so that it doesn't run the risk of coming unraveled, or I don't lose twists as I wrap. And then I'm going to wrap this whole chenille hackle mix all together, and it kind of helps if you go in and stroke some of the fibers back so you're not trapping them down. For example, right here, I lay those back and out of the way so they're not getting trapped by the coming wrap. And as you're wrapping, you will start to reduce the twist. So I'll give it a couple more twists here. I should get about 2 more wraps in there. Of course, there's no set number of turns or wraps that you're going to get out of something like this. Actually, I think I can squeeze one more in behind that cone, and it's a good thing. And now I'm going to throw my thread over. Now, if you saw my previous tutorial, a lot of folks don't like this kind of downy or fluffy kind of feathers there. I really don't mind that. In fact, I like it. It really creates a lot of movement, especially up at the head. Once I've got it secured with my wraps of thread, I come in and trim the excess. I'm going to put a few security wraps on there. And then I've got a super bugger. You can darn near take hemostats and try to rip those feathers out, and you're not going to get them out of there. One of the problems that you'll run into with a cone head or a bead head is that you can't quite get a really good whip finish with your whip finish tool, and a lot of your half hitch tools that you find are not big enough to go over that cone. So it's going to behoove you to learn how to finish a fly using your fingers the old-fashioned way. We'll show this to you in another tutorial. Go back and look through the archives. But I'm going to finish this right behind the cone head just using my fingers, just like my dad and grandfather did before there were good fly tying tools. Finish that. I'll give it another one. And I trim my excess. If you tie a good knot, there's really no need to put head cement on that. So there it is, a slight variation on the good old-fashioned woolly bugger. We call this a super bugger. Little flash in the tail, the twist technique with your chenille and your hackle feather. Take that out and go fishing. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned. And remember to check our blog for step-by-step instructions as well as the recipes for all the flies that we show you here on our YouTube channel.